at the Cage Fury headquarters here in New Jersey, and with me today, the man responsible for all the fights coming up at CFFC 121 and 122, Cage Fury's matchmaker, Arias Garcia Jr. Arias, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great, buddy. How are you?
I am great. Thank you for having me back. Always love a trip to the Cage Fury office. And,
appreciate you coming down.
well, hey, man, my pleasure. And let me just start with, I just said you're the matchmaker for Cage Fury. Kind of just tell me a little bit about your role. What does that mean?
Yeah, so what I do, Jake, I reach out to, the camps in the area, even actually across the country, the managers, and try to pick the top talent. And, it's pretty cool because I get an opportunity to look at those and offer the matchups that I think will either be, pleasing to the fans and hopefully, a stepping stone for one of their careers to make it to the next level, whether it be, hopefully the UFC.
And when you go about picking, the best fights, in your opinion, how do you do that? How do you choose the two best fighters to go up against each other? Like, what's your strategy in matchmaking?
So I put a lot of trust in my network. And when I say my network, I'm talking about, the management companies I deal with, the camps I deal with from across the country. And I really ask, these guys, who's really one of the best prospects you have? Or who's a guy that you think can really, really make it to the next level? And I'm not, shy about asking for the best talent. And, and when I get a list of names, you kind of look at, okay, this is a 5-0, this is versus a 4-1. You don't really want to get people a mismatch. So it's just, and then after that, there's a lot of steps that go there. It's negotiating the purse, it's negotiating travel, it's negotiating, 1,000 other things that the public doesn't really get to see, which unfortunately is a lot of work before those fighters step into the cage.
And I know something else you have to deal with, including for 121 and 122, fights fall through last minute, and you have to pull different opponents, and you have to pull all these tricks out of your hat. So, how do you deal with that stress last minute and still make these fights happen?
Yeah, so usually, we communicate through text, a manager or a trainer. And I know if it's fight week and a manager calls, my heart drops. Because I know it's usually bad news. It's usually, hey, we had trouble getting this a medical appointment, we don't think we're going to get done, or the guy's injured. So, there's an immense amount of pressure on me at that time. Because not only do we want to save the fight, but, the other guy could have trained 6 to 8 weeks, for this fight, sacrificed all this time with his family. And he could be a fight or two away from, the UFC. And you want to save that fight because you just don't want to delay that person's progress. So, and again, when I do that, unfortunately, I ruffle some feathers because, a guy will, I'll reach out to a management company like, Eric, you only hit me up for, short notice guys. But I think that's just another cool aspect that there's fighters out there that I owe a large amount of gratitude that stay ready, that are on weight or near weight that say, hey, Arias, if and I have fighters reach out to me all the time. If someone reaches out, I'm ready. And I love those guys. But yeah, it's unfortunately we see it in the UFC. So it's not just a regional thing. We see it all over, and it's one of the, rough spots that, we have to deal with.
It's just a part of the fight game, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And I have to say, you guys do a great job of dealing with it because it seems like the fights always happen no matter what. And something I've noticed with other promotions is they like to build up a star. They like to pick their guys and kind of feed them to, lack of better words, lesser opponents.
Right.
Cage Fury doesn't do that. Your guys' motto, you promote this statement, no easy fights. Where did that motto come from, and why do you do that? I
don't know if it was Rob or myself who coined it first, but it's something that we take a tremendous amount of pride in. No easy fights. And again, when people hear that, it's only to get the fighters ready for the next step. Jake, I think you've been at our weigh-ins before. The fighters are treated like professionals. Sit down, here's a poster, sign it. They love that. It's getting them ready because that's what they do at the next level. That's what they do at the UFC. We want our fighters to not only make it to the UFC, but to stay in the UFC and have a career. And unfortunately, I tell this all the time. I get it all the time where a fighter will ask me, Arias, what advice do you have for me? I always tell them, be smart, but also take tough fights on the regional scene. I've seen it, before where you'll see a padded guy with a padded record go on Dana White Contender Series. Mm-hmm. They might be 7-0, but the guys that they're fighting are, under 500 records. And usually their outcome isn't the best. So if you don't take tough fights on a regional scene, then you're going to get exposed on the next, on the next level. So you do a disservice to yourself if you don't take those tough fights. And that's what, again, we're there just to prepare them to the next level. So yeah, no easy fights. If you want to pad your record, don't call me.
And rest of 2023, we're a little bit over halfway through the year. I just talked to Rob recently. He gave me his goals for the company. Where do you see CFFC going for the rest of the year?
Yeah, so my goals for Cage Fury are probably similar to Rob's, where we just want to keep building our brand. Whether, I'm pretty sure, I've seen your interview with Rob, it's the Fury grappling, it's the collegiate wrestling. I just want to keep expanding our brand to only get better, to just build the partnerships. And I can see us dabbling in other forms of combat sports, whether it be, the jiu-jitsu with the striking, combat jiu-jitsu. I just think you're going to see Cage Fury in a lot of other different type of combat sports.
And then talking about expansion, there's talks of, going to Canada, to Boston, to Vegas. So with that being said, hopefully we get to see these new regions. Are you as a matchmaker going to look at these new regions for fresh faces and fresh gyms?
Absolutely. So we did which you probably know of, we did a recent deal with Rowan where we were granted some interns, and those interns, phenomenal. And the interns I had under me, one of their duties was to research certain markets in the regional area across the United States that we were thinking about possibly expanding to. And they built a really good database of who are the contacts over there, who are the gyms, who are the fighters. So I think no matter what area we go to, I think we'll be successful. And I think we've proven that with our track record in Tampa and Mississippi now.
So I'm putting my journalist hat on real quick, because I need to ask
Yeah.
one journalistic type question rather than just hype up your good work the whole time. That being said, any little sneak previews, sneak peeks at any fights you're in the works of making that we can expect to see in 2023?
Yeah. So I'm really excited about September 1st and 2nd, back-to-back nights. We're back at the Parks Casino in Bensalem, Pennsylvania. Great venue, great partnership over there. Really excited to announce that Kyle Dawkins will be coming back to claim his 185 title versus Greg Ellis. The moniker we talked about earlier, Jake, no easy fights. I think the world of Greg for asking for this fight. Greg wanted this fight. Greg could have, he could possibly be a fight away from the Contender Series or even a short notice UFC fight, and to take on Kyle Dawkins, a UFC vet who's an absolute monster, to ask for this fight, I think speaks volumes of his courage and character, and I think it'll be a phenomenal fight.
I think it's safe to say, one, yes, phenomenal fight. Two, whoever wins that belt, UFC is next for them.
I think so.
September 1st and 2nd, we will see you there, ladies and gentlemen. And when we're talking about good fights that you've made, oppositely, fights you haven't made, fights that got away from you. Is there one specific fight that you feel like, I really wanted to make it and it didn't work out?
Yeah, so that's a great question. It's funny because the fight happened later on, if that makes sense. And this will go into like Aljamain. I love Aljamain. Aljamain Sterling was our 135 champion at that time. Jimmy Rivera was an absolute monster out of Tiger Schulman. And that was a fight that we tried to put on. But I don't want to say unfortunately, but Aljamain got the call, and that fight later happened on in the UFC. And that happens a lot, Jake. And I don't mean it, but like there's so many fights like Johan Lioness just fought Mike Malott before Mike just fought on the recent card. That fight was a go for Cage Fury, but Johan got the call to Dana White Contender Series, and that fight happened. And I love that. And I'm so glad that a lot of the fights that I don't make don't come to fruition, because unfortunately it's going to stall somebody. So if Jimmy Rivera and Aljamain Sterling fight in a regional scene, one of them is going to lose, and one of them might be bounced back a spot or two, and they might have to fight. And that would happen to Johan and Mike. So I hate seeing it. I mean, that's the one thing I tell you right now I hate. I hate seeing CFFC veterans fight in UFC. I hate it, but it happens. But yeah, those fights, I'm kind of happy that they don't happen. But yeah, I wish some of them would have happened under our banner.
So when I talked to Rob, he was saying when he sees his fighters move on to the UFC, it's like, I just watched like my kid grow up and move on. Right. Do you feel that way a little bit, or is it more so like, should have been mine?
Oh, absolutely. Me and Rob are on the same page, and I'll tell you this, Jake. A lot of my favorite moments happen nowhere near a cage. Nowhere near. My favorite fighter, and I'll always take this with me, my favorite fighter is Jonathan Webb. Signed Jonathan as an amateur. Did all of his fights in the CFFC until the UFC. One of the most satisfying times in Cage Fury is I was at Rob's house, and Rob was helping Jonathan at the time, and he got the call to be in the UFC, and we kind of tricked Rob and his wife Alex to come to Rob's house, and basically Rob told Jonathan that he was in the UFC, and it was like we're so happy. Like I wish the whole roster would go. So now, I mean, it sucks because we're not going to see that great talent in our area, like so close and so like in this atmosphere that's so tight. But for them to because that's what everyone wants to do. They want to make it to the UFC. So that was one of probably in the 10 or 13 years I've been doing this. It's one of my favorite moments, and a lot of my favorite moments don't happen near the cage.
And Webb's an interesting example too, because he grew up with you guys, moved on, and now he's coaching prospects who are fighting with you guys. So is that a unique perspective too?
Absolutely. And Jonathan went from being a fighter for us, and now he's the head of Fury Grappling. Right. And again, that's what we talked about earlier. No easy fights. Jonathan Webb came to us and broke every ticket sale record imaginable, and I put him up against Lyman Good. Yeah. So I wasn't protecting Jonathan. We wanted to see the best fight. We wanted to see who was the best welterweight in the area, and that it ended to a no contest. But that tells you ticket sales weren't we didn't care. We wanted to see who the baddest welterweight was, and whoever won, we knew was going to go to you. So and thankfully both of them did.
And you were just talking about Aljamain Sterling, bantamweight champion of the UFC. Recently, he was the first ever induction to the Cage Fury Hall of Fame. How was that night? How did Aljo like that? How was that received?
It was awesome. I know we put out a little snippet of the dinner, to see his brothers again. Aljamain's another fighter that I'll hold dear in my heart. It was a fighter that I signed, and he's our first ever, champion to move on to to become UFC champion. I know Alex Perez fought for a title. I know Caitlin Chukagian fought. I have high hopes for Aaron, but that Hall of Fame night was so awesome, and I was at Newark when Aljamain fought Henry, and I was really, really upset and disappointed to see Aljamain get booed in Newark. And for us, we had the dinner on Friday night. Saturday night, we played the video. We had him in there. For him to get choked up, it really, I told him, I hugged him in the cage, and I said, that's what you deserved in Newark, because everyone cheered for him. He doesn't deserve the stuff he gets, but again, it's another, when he won the title, even though it was an illegal name, my daughter watched, and we were just so excited. We didn't care how we won it, but it was, like I said, a lot of great moments don't happen near the cage, but it was a really awesome thing to be a part of. Kudos to Rod for putting that together. Spivak, the jeweler, it was so awesome. And it's great to see Aljamain wear that everywhere he goes. You see it on UFC Fight Pass. He's at the UFC, so it couldn't have gone to a better person.
Excited to see what other inductees we get this year and next year. And, talking UFC, they're matchmakers, Mick Maynard, Sean Shelby. Do you ever find yourself working with them in terms of helping them figure out the next fighters to get, or vice versa?
So Rob usually is a grapevine to those guys, and they will ask if they have if a guy's on their radar, they'll ask, how's a Charles Radke? So I really think that the fighters need to be wary of how they not only handle themselves on social media, but with us too, because the matchmakers in the UFC deal with so many egos, they don't need another one, causing issues. So Rob mainly talks to Mick and Sean, and they'll ask for his input, and there'll be plenty of times where we'll reach out to, Mick or Sean and be like, hey, listen, this guy is going to hurt people on the regional scene, and they'll usually take Rob's advice, and they'll either take him to the Contender or UFC.
And talking about Mick and Sean and UFC matchmaking, even PFL or whatever the upper echelon of promotions are. Do you ever have any interest in going and working for one of those companies, or are you completely content with Cage Fury?
No, completely content with what I do for Cage Fury. I can't be appreciative to Rob enough for the opportunity he gives me. I don't do this full time, and I don't think if I worked for the UFC or any of the upper tier organizations, I wouldn't be able to do what I do 9 to 5. So I'm super loyal to Rob. He gave me this opportunity, and I'm satisfied with what I do. like you said earlier, it's like seeing your kids grow up and make it to the next level. I love that. There's not much satisfaction at the next level because, I think matchmaking, the higher it gets, it gets easier a little bit. I mean, yeah, you got to deal with the egos and, management, but, I would love to be in Sean Shelby or Mick Maynard's shoes and just pick this guy who's under contract to fight that guy who's under contract. And I think the world of those guys because I don't think I can deal with what they deal on a daily basis, but I think it's more rewarding on this level, so I'm going to stay here.
You are a very busy man.
Yeah.
You have a 9-to-5, and
Yeah.
You're a social worker, from my understanding. So
Yeah.
could you go into that a little bit? What does your job entail?
Yeah, so I have 2 master's degrees. I have a master's in social work and a master's in child advocacy. Since 2004, I've been working with the Department of Children and Families here in New Jersey. I've worked with adoption, kids in foster care, and I've done intake, doing investigations of abuse or neglect. It's a super, super rewarding job, super stressful, but for the last 19 years, this will be my 19th year of doing it, and it's like kind of like MMA is my outlet. But I have a passion for working with children, especially those that are underprivileged and those that are suffered some type of trauma. I really think it's rewarding work. So it's like there's 2 things that I tell my wife that I'm an expert about, and that's child welfare and MMA. So.
And your wife, your family.
Yeah.
I see your son working the cage, your daughter selling me shorts at the concession stand.
Yeah.
Like, does your family love to be involved in cage fear? Do they have a big future with the company, hopefully?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like, I laugh when I see pictures there's a picture from CFFC 6, which is 2011.
Wow.
Where all 3 of my kids are in the cage, and there's the old CFFC logo. And I look at it, and, like, my daughter's 21. Just graduated college at Pitt. My son's 17. And, like, Rob jokes with my youngest 14-year-old that he's the real boss man. And my son who wrestles for Highland and Triton, asks me all the time, Dad, when can I get my first amateur fight? And I'm absolutely not. Absolutely not. I do see, because the way that Rob built Cage Fury was family first. So Rob's extended many opportunities to my family, which I'm appreciative of. So I do see myself giving the reins over, but I don't want my boys doing matchmaking. It's too stressful, man. It's too stressful.
So your son wants to actually fight?
He does.
What if he's like, all right, Dad, you're not taking me. I'm going to go to Fury or Art of War. What are you going to do?
Oh, my God. That'll never happen. But listen, if my son really wants to fight, I would let him, especially in the amateurs where, I'm matchmaking. So that might be the one I do kind of mismatch a little bit or give a little bit of favoritism. But yeah, he's a wrestler, but his first love is golf. Jake, you've watched, MMA. I've been next to crying wives, crying girlfriends, people that I really like and I really trust, and I see them get knocked out cold.
Mm-hmm.
I seen Pat Sabatini, dislocate his arm in a way that I would never want to see an arm go. Scary knockouts that I've been front and center for, and I feel bad for that person, and I couldn't imagine that happening to my own blood. So if he wants to, he would have to get the okay from me and his mama. He'll be 18 in December, so he might not need it for a couple more months. But it's brutal, man. It's a hurt sport. It's brutal.
So it's a very stern, we'll talk about it.
That's right.
Good enough. And Arias, again, thank you so much for your time, man. Before we get out of here, as I always like to do, I just want to give you the opportunity. There's so many Cage Fury fans, and a lot of them don't know you guys behind the scenes, but you're literally the reason we watch these fights. You're the one that calls them up, amongst many other pieces, but you're the matchmaker. So that being said, is there anything you would like to say to everybody? If so, the mic is yours.
Yeah, so I don't get anybody to the UFC. I really don't. The fighter puts in the work. The fighter sacrifices their time away from their family. The fighter puts in the days where they're working from 9 to 5 and then going to the gym for 3 hours to train. I don't get anyone to the UFC. I provide a platform for them to get that opportunity. So I'm flattered by the comments I get, but it's really the fighter themselves that puts them in a position to get them to the next level. I'm flattered that we're, like I told Rob about Aljamain, I'm flattered to be a small part of Aljamain's journey to be a UFC champion. If you bought a ticket to our show or attended our show, thank you so much. Really love the casual fans. I think we're getting more of that now, we're getting more of the casual fan where I'm not coming to see Jake Noecker. I'm coming to see, just coming to be here because I went to the last CFFC and it was awesome. The ones that have been with us since day one, really appreciate you guys that being on a ride. We're going to do so many things in 2023 and 2024. And I hope if you loved CFFC, you're going to love Fury Grappling. You're going to love the collegiate wrestling scene that we're going to do. Everything that we do in Cage Fury, we're going to transfer that over to the new events that we do. So, Jake, appreciate you. And yeah, stay tuned.
I appreciate you. And yes, indeed, stay tuned because this Friday, July 14th, CFFC 121. And next week, CFFC 122 on July 20th, UFC Fight Pass and OnlyFans. Thank you to this man.
Thank you.
Arias Garcia Jr. and all of Cage Fury. And we'll see you guys there. Beautiful. Cut.